Hello and welcome. Police in Gambia in Africa are investigating the deaths of 66 children who have been linked to 4 brands of imported Indian cough syrup. Now, these children died evidently from consuming this cough syrup, which was manufactured in India. More specifically, these were promethazine oral solution, cofexmalin baby cough syrup, Maxoff baby cough syrup, and Magrip and cold syrup. They were manufactured by an Indian company called Pharmaceuticals, which apparently, according to the World Health Organization, failed to provide guarantees about their safety. The Indian government is investigating this as well. Now, while the company that's Maiden has said that it was shocked and saddened over the incident, and it said that it followed Indian health protocols and was cooperating with the investigation, the matter is obviously a long way to go before there is a clear understanding on what exactly happened, and more importantly, where it happened. So let's use this to understand what is the larger context of spurious drugs in India. Now, there have been many studies done over the years, including by the Central Drugs and Drugs Standards Organization. The last one that I have in my hand is 2009. Now, let me use some quick samples and figures that were mentioned then. So, the study that was conducted in 2009 used 24,780 samples from 40,000 pharmacies. And they found that about 644 drugs were sound-alike drugs and look-alike drugs, which means that it could sound and feel or look the same, but it was not the same. But they were not spurious. However, only 11 out of 24,136, that's 11 were accepted or not accepted by the manufacturers as genuine or belonging to them. So the number seems very small, at least in this sample set that was collected a little while ago. Now, however, we have to remember that India is the largest manufacturer of generic drugs, and therefore it is perhaps logical that counterfeit drugs or spurious drugs are also manufactured to some extent here and potentially exported as well. So now let's come back to the Indian context, and let's try and understand it from 2 points of view. One is how bad is the problem, and today, particularly in 2022, and secondly, how are we seeing this, if so, at the clinical end? As people consume it, and what are doctors saying about it. So to discuss that, I am joined by 2 guests, Dr. Rajeev Jayadevan, former president of the Cochin chapter of the Indian Medical Association. Thank you very much for joining us. And Nakul, Pasricha, president and CEO of Pharma Secure, and also president of the Authentication Solution Providers Association in Delhi. So Pharma Secure works with leading pharmaceutical organizations to track and verify their supply chains and to obviously ensure authenticity of the drugs that are being manufactured and delivered. So Nakul, let me begin with you. When we talk about spurious drugs, and now I'm limiting the conversation mostly to India, what are we talking about?
Yeah, thank you, Govind. So the study that you started off by quoting, the CBSCO study, was, as you rightly pointed out, the first such comprehensive study that was done in India to measure the extent of spurious and substandard drugs. That study was then conducted again as an update in 2015, and the outcome was similar, where they found something in the range of about 0.3% of drugs to be spurious and about 3% of drugs, of drug samples, I should say, to be substandard. However, there have been other studies that have been done, including a comprehensive study around the world by the WHO in, I think it was 2018, where they found 1 out of 10 drugs that they sampled and that they were able to find across countries to be spurious, which they call falsified or substandard. So it is a tremendous problem. Other estimates have taken it as high as 20 or 30%. The association that you mentioned that I chair, ASPA, we conducted our own study, which was a meta study where we just looked at the reports of spurious or substandard drugs in India, and what is the number of such reports that are happening or of incidents across the country, and that number jumped by 47% from 2020 to 2021, which is the last year for which we have data, of course. So it is a problem that has been growing, and it is a problem that I believe has been domestically, at least, not given the importance and the attention that it
Right.
really needs, in order to save patients' lives.
Right. And I lost the number that you said. Can you repeat that number? It jumped from how much to how much?
Yeah, so from 2020 to 2021, we saw a 47% increase in the number of incidents of spurious or substandard medicines being discovered in India.
So, what does that translate into in the context of the number of samples, let's say, in any study?
So we didn't do our own sampling. We just looked at the media reports of such incidents that were coming out independently, and kind of reporting where there have been spurious or substandard drugs being discovered, being sold in the markets, that has been officially catalogued,
Right.
and reported.
Right.
And just by that number, you can kind of see that the percentage is increasing. To get an accurate number across the length and breadth of India is, of course, a big challenge, which is why the CBSU study stands there. There have been other researchers that have come to India and done a study. I think it was done, it's been over a decade since such a study was done, and they found up to 10% of the samples that they found were substandard.
Right. Okay. Now, I'm going to come to Dr. Jayadevan in a second. But when you say spurious and substandard, do these words go together? Is there a specific distinction between the two?
Right. This whole problem is very, very important. It used to be that you would just call it counterfeit, but counterfeit as a term can also be mixed up with IPR issues, which is well documented in terms of some of the kind of push and pull that happens with that. So spurious really means a drug that is falsely labeled to position itself or represent as being made by a genuine manufacturer. It will many times not have any active ingredients or genuine API in it. It will not be effective. And it will be something that is intended to deceive the buyer or the patient. Substandard is something that typically will be from the manufacturer that it claims to be, but may not have the right quality of ingredients or enough of the ingredient,
right,
so that its efficacy is under question.
Right. Dr. Jayadevan, again, a broad overview from you first. So how are you seeing this problem or issue of spurious or substandard drugs in India today?
Yes, yeah. For our viewers, I think we must break these technical terms down, because spurious is not a word that's commonly used in India outside of technicalities. So I'll explain this with a simple example. So here's an envelope that basically says ₹100. Now, when I say, suppose this envelope contains only 50 rupees instead of 100, then it becomes what is called a substandard product, which means the product promises to deliver 100 rupees, but it only contains 50 rupees. Now, sometimes this envelope may be completely blank. It may contain nothing at all. So then that is called a category A spurious, which means the product only has 100 rupees written on it, but it contains nothing. And then the third category is when the 100 rupee note itself has some imperfections. It may be broken, it may be torn, and so on. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is spurious simply means that the product does not come up to the standard. It can be a completely wrong product, like a completely fake, if you will, like Nakli product, or it may be something that does not have enough that it promises, or has minor irregularities. So that's the simplest way in which I can break down this classification. So CDSCO has classified this into A, B, and C. A is absolutely Nakli, B is the 50 rupee example I showed you, and C will be the torn 100 rupee note. So that's a gross oversimplification for our viewers. So if you consider a medication, let's say you go to the doctor gives you a prescription, you go to the pharmacy, you buy the antibiotic. If the antibiotic doesn't contain the antibiotic, then your treatment fails. Now, the antibiotic dose is 100 milligrams, and the tablet you get contains only 10 milligrams. You may partially improve, but it may create other problems. The doctor may give you another stronger antibiotic, which he believes was because of treatment failure, and that may induce what is called antibiotic resistance. We often hear about antibiotic resistance, where these bugs fail to get killed by the routinely used ones. So that's a big problem that doctors are trying to counter. So I'm just trying to illustrate that with an example. So you asked me where it fits with current day practice. Healthcare delivery is a long chain. It is not just a doctor that's involved here or the medication. The healthcare delivery starts with a patient who approaches a healthcare provider, say a doctor or another qualified person, and the person makes a diagnosis and decides that the person needs a medication. So the prescription gets written out, the patient takes it to the pharmacy, and it gets dispensed, and the patient takes it. So that completes a simple circuit, but the chain can break at many levels. The doctor himself or herself might not be well qualified, or if the doctor has a fake degree, then there's a problem. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very commonly. The second is the institution that the doctor is working at might not be keeping standards. So that is one area. The third is the medication that is dispensed out into the hands of the patient might not be of top quality. So these are all areas that are continuously worked upon in terms of quality improvement. But as Mr. Nakul said, I believe that overall the situation in India is getting better over the years. As more regulations are coming in, transparency is coming in, more reporting occurs. That is one more point I would like to raise. Just because a problem is being reported, that does not mean it is becoming more common. In fact, it may be the opposite. If we start hearing about fake drugs, it might be a good thing. It might be a sign that authorities have started checking more and more. So I think our viewers must take this in perspective as well. There is no excuse for a spurious drug at all. It must be zero, but we know zero is ideal, but we must keep it as close to zero as possible.
Right, and I'll come back to the stats with Nakul in a moment. But Dr. Jayadevan, on the clinical side, how are you seeing this, or what have we seen? I mean, the extreme example that we started with, of course, was this Gambia case, and the most unfortunate part being that these are children who obviously may not have been able to resist, let's say, which a spurious drug which an adult may have suffered from but not succumb to it.
Yes, it is so tragic what happened in Gambia. I believe a full investigation report is awaited. But the preliminary information is that contaminants within these syrups along the lines of diethyl glycerol, which is a kidney toxic agent. It's basically like if I sell pickles, if I make pickles and sell them, if my chili powder is poisoned, yes, I might not know that the chili powder is poisoned until a consumer of my pickle comes back to me and says, look, I ate your pickle and I got sick. So an investigation is launched and I find that one of my ingredients was wrong. So it is something like that, what happened over there. But the further details, we have to wait for it to happen. Sure. But it's clear that the kidney failure is caused by this agent, and such reports have already occurred in the past, not only in healthcare, but also in other industries. So I will not go into that. So contamination occurs in all sorts of products that humans use, not just medications. So you asked if we commonly see it. Fortunately, I'm happy to say that in India, where I practice or where I network with other doctors who practice, complications as a result of contamination is not something we see every day. So it is not something, I will not say it doesn't exist, but I have not seen it happen. But one way doctors stay safe is to prescribe products that their patients will come back and tell you, doctor, I took the medicine and everything was fine. So doctors like me are very cautious because the patient comes to us with absolute trust, and it's the doctor's duty to deliver that part of the trust. So I might not write something which I'm not familiar with. That's my style of practice. So when I say I have not seen it happen, it might be because my prescribing pattern is a safe one. And I've checked with the organization. Reports of fatalities from India are there in the media, I believe in 1973, an Egmore incident occurred. And then later in Jammu and Kashmir, there were problems and so on. So there are reports, but in everyday practice, I don't see it.
Right, and I'll come back to prescription towards the end, because we'll try and see what people can take away from this. But amongst the cases that you have seen or you've heard of, let's say in the last 10 or 20 years, what was the common thread? Is it that were these manufacturers who were not even part of the supply chain and somehow managed to get things in, or it was substandard in some other way?
Govind, the question is to Mr. Nakul?
No, to you, Dr. Jayadevan.
Okay. Yes, I'm quoting media reports here. The adverse outcomes are frequently the result of an ingredient which should not have been there in the product. If a tablet of paracetamol should contain 500 and they only deliver 100, the patient might not have a complication. The fever might not come down, but the patient is not harmed in that sense. But if the product contains a dangerous substance which should not be there, yes, the patient might get harmed. And that's really what happened in Gambia. So what the other situation that could happen is, let's say, medicines contain preservatives. See, when I say an injection or a tablet of an antibiotic is spurious, it might also mean that the ingredients in it are abnormal. The normal ingredient of it, or let's say the active ingredient or the antibiotic itself, might be of good quality, but the other parts of it, let's say the coloring agent, the preservative, the filler, the capsule, etc., or even if you take a bottle of a pill, what you call the cap of the pill,
right,
or cap of the bottle, even that has to be of good quality. So quality is distributed across multiple angles, multiple aspects of the medication. Let's take an injection. The injection is meant to be kept in stable form, and if one of the preservatives is spurious, the person who receives the injection might have a serious outcome, even death.
Right,
so
but
these are possibilities.
Right, but you're also saying that there are not that many cases, at least that you've encountered or have heard of from your peers, at least in recent years, whichever way this goes.
It is something we are careful against. We monitor through official reporting, like Mr. Nakul talked about how surveys are done, how sampling is done. And I understand that the sampling process has improved over the years. I know it's nowhere near ideal, but among all the batches that are being manufactured in India, we are in a better position now compared to, say, 15 years ago, when fewer batches were being tested. That's the information I have.
Right. Okay. Nakul, can I come back to you? So, the percentage that you quoted, I quoted the 2000 figure of 11 samples out of 23,000 samples, and you said the 2015 figure is somewhat similar. So now, is that something to worry about, or is that something to be sanguine about?
So, Govind, what I would say is, first of all, obviously, even one life lost is a tragedy, and we must be doing something. We must be more vigilant in terms of ensuring the quality and ensuring that we don't have spurious or substandard medicines. But if I just talk about spurious, as Dr. Rajeev said, spurious is a term that is not commonly used outside of the technical context. So if I just switch to counterfeiting and I just take you on a journey across other industries in India, and it's a way of answering your question. In auto parts, 1 out of 3 auto parts sold in the aftermarket is considered to be counterfeit. These are industries figures. Right. In FMCG, studies have found up to 30%. In nutraceuticals, an Assocham study found 60 to 70%. Pesticide seeds, fertilizers, again 60 to 70%. So to be very honest with you, if you tell me that in pharmaceuticals across India, and I'm not talking about obviously the reputed practices and the urban centers where ethical and careful doctors, like Dr. Rajeev may be practicing. I'm talking about perhaps tier 2, tier 3 towns. if you tell me that the rate of spurious drugs is 0.3%, I would be a little bit skeptical of that, given how widespread counterfeits are in other industries, and also given the immense profit margins that unethical bad actors can stand to make. In fact, statistics I saw from one of the large pharma companies in one of their presentations said that being a drug counterfeiter can actually be more profitable and lucrative than being a heroin distributor. So that's the kind of profit that people stand to make, and that surely will be a lure for many criminals. So I don't think we should let the statistics necessarily cause us to feel good. I would still continue to be very vigilant. But I mean, there is some good news, and I'll talk about that, if you'd like me
to. Go ahead.
So the good news is that, I mean, I've been in this industry looking at this issue right from the 2009 report, when I really got into to this kind of line of work, and since then, 2009 is actually when there was a very prominent incident of counterfeit of spurious drugs landing up in Nigeria, marked as made in India. And the question was raised to the Indian government, why are these fake drugs coming into our country? And an investigation was launched, and it was found that they never originated from India. They originated from another country, from China, and they were falsely labeled as made in India. So the government actually took, I think, a fantastic initiative to protect our exports of pharmaceuticals through a technology called serialization traceability, which is something that around the world many regulators have also adopted after that. So India in many ways was kind of a leader in that, and that's something that I've seen being adopted and helping to secure supply chains. Unfortunately, what they didn't do, because we are all well aware that the regulatory aspect of pharmaceuticals is different for exports as it is for the domestic market. So domestically, regulation was not in place. There were steps, research, delays, draft notifications, what have you. But finally, there has been something which has been published in the Gazette saying that the top 300 drugs in India will have QR codes where consumers can scan them using a simple smartphone and get information about the product and be able to kind of assess for themselves, at least based on that information, whether the drug is genuine. And we would hope that it doesn't just stay for the top 300 brands, it expands across the industry. So such measures are needed to help empower consumers, and I'm glad to see that the regulation is finally coming, and people will have some way of checking other than just handing the package and like a visual inspection.
Right, and that brings me to an allied question. So, where does the onus really lie? So, for example, let's say if you take a drug like Combiflam manufactured by Sanofi, and I'm only quoting that because we had covered this in the context of misinformation around that particular drug. So, assuming there is some degree of either counterfeit or spurious manufacturing happening for that brand and under this manufacturer's label, whose responsibility it is it primarily to go after this?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. When I speak to kind of drug regulators, or when I see their presentations at conferences, there's one kind of common theme, which is that they are under-resourced. It is virtually impossible for any kind of a drug controller, either at the national level or at a state level, to really say, look, I'm going to go and take the responsibility to examine every drug that's out there and ensure that it's safe and efficacious. So, but obviously there is a responsibility, and I think we need to strengthen that kind of arm of our system, so that we're able to deploy more resources in the market and be able to fish out these drugs. Second, obviously it is the manufacturer's responsibility in my view. Clearly there is a long supply chain. Clearly there are, as in this case, it could have been the fault. The investigation may turn out that, look, it was something that was further up the supply chain that went in and caused this issue. But at the end of the day, I mean, my view is that what's the last line of defense before it goes out and into the hands of a patient? So I do think that certain measures need to be kind of taken. For example, in Maiden Pharmaceuticals case, Dr. Rajeev would be well aware. In Kerala, 5 times Maiden Pharmaceuticals drugs have been found to be substandard. So, what is the point at which we say, look, this company needs to, perhaps take some measures,
right.
In order to make the drug safer. But given all of that, given that it is complex, my view is that although consumers don't have the ability to go and do lab testing, at the very least there should be something, and that's what I feel that some kind of measures of for consumers to be able to at least get information about the product, be able to get an e-leaflet, let's say by scanning it. We all know sometimes it's not so easy to read the information that's printed in small text, and be able to perhaps check for themselves, will help educate and hopefully protect.
Right, and supply chain and last mile are very critical components of this, including the trust that people place in the pharmacy that they finally go to. So, last few comments as we run out of time. And Nakul, let me come back to you. So, as you look ahead, again, since we've been launched into this theme by what's happened, unfortunately, in Gambia, what are the 2 or 3 things that you feel that we should be focusing on extensively or specifically from also a consumer point? Either from a regulatory standpoint or from a manufacturing standpoint, as we look ahead.
Yeah. So from a regulatory standpoint, I feel India is really the pharmacy to the world. Our pharma industry is fantastic. It has been growing steadily. It is one of our kind of star industries, right? And what I feel, especially because I also have the opportunity and the privilege to interact with people from around the world, I feel that such incidents, no matter what the cause, they should make us sit up. They should make us accept that we have a tremendous responsibility. A responsibility to our industry, a business, economic responsibility, but a moral responsibility to do more. And I think we have been taking certain steps. I think we need to continue to focus on that from a regulatory perspective, and I think we need to kind of obviously take all different concerns into consideration. But at the end of it, we have to be moving forward and getting better. From a manufacturer's perspective, also, I would say there's an economic angle to it, obviously, where if our exports are under any kind of shadow because of high-profile incidents, it is never good business, clearly. But again, this is something that saves lives. This is something that we should be very proud of doing, and I think manufacturers need to just make sure that they get the the best kind of quality checks in place and the best solutions in place to make sure that spurious but also substandard medicines are not kind of leaving their doors.
Dr. Jayadevan, last word to you, and in the form of 2 questions, if I may. So one is, what are the kind of regulatory tightening that you would like to see in a broader context? And secondly, how would you advise patients to receive prescriptions or to check prescriptions when they go to doctors or at the point of pharmacy purchase to ensure that they are buying the right drugs?
I'll briefly answer because it's closing time. See, the ideal thing to happen would, for all medical products, regardless of genre, to have a universal seal of quality that is endorsed by the government of India. That is utopian. It has to be, that is the ideal. But I know, being ideal, we might not reach there. But if the second best will be a suitably high percentage of batches of medications receiving an inspection, an external and neutral inspection, preferably from the government or a neutral body, which is outside of the manufacturer. But I'll tell you from a personal perspective, from my practice across, working in multiple nations, the best form of monitoring is self-monitoring. I believe that. In my practice, we audit everything. We audit patient feedback, we audit patient medication given, results, biopsies, everything. and we sit together and we look for imperfections, and we don't penalize people. We look for imperfections, we find them, and so that is how we run a practice. So that is one way. But when you have a large number of manufacturers doing the same in the same business, it is impossible to expect each one of these manufacturers to engage in diligent self-monitoring for various reasons. That's where the role of an external agency comes in. And I think the two combined, an internal monitoring must be given points in terms of, say, credit points. If a company is doing internal monitoring, I would rate that company very highly, regardless of how large that company is. I must also add that just because a company is small, it does not mean that its products are not good enough. The reverse can also be true. So what I would call ideal is to promote self-monitoring, transparency, and also a greater number or greater percentage of products being officially verified and verified by the government of India through its agencies.
Right. Dr. Jayadevan and Nakul, Pasricha, thank you so much for joining me.